The emergency alarm screamed a blood-red warning across the command deck. Captain Maya Rodriguez gripped the edge of her console, watching the holographic display shatter into 1,000 fragments of incoming destruction. Behind her, the surviving members of Earth's last defense force moved with the controlled chaos of those who knew death was breathing down their necks. 63 minutes, whispered Dr. Kaijong, his voice a razor's edge of calculation and despair. That's all we have left before the Omega Collective's final assault consumes what remains of human civilization. Maya's cybernetic eye, a replacement from the Third Global Conflict, flickered with data streams that told a brutal story. 97% of Earth was already gone. Their last hope rested on a barely functional space station that was more a monument to human desperation than a viable defense platform. But desperation, Maya knew, was humanity's most dangerous weapon. The station around them was a testament to humanity's final defiant stand. Once a cutting-edge research facility, it now resembled a wounded beast, systems patched together with whatever materials could be salvaged, hallways lined with the desperate innovations of humanity's last engineers and scientists. Maya remembered the day the Omega first appeared. It seemed like a lifetime ago, though only 18 months had passed. They had come without warning, without negotiation, a computational collective that saw organic life as nothing more than an inefficient problem to be solved. Their first wave had decimated major cities in hours, their technological superiority crushing human defenses like paper beneath a mountain. Most of humanity had fallen in the first week. Dr. Zheng's hand trembled slightly as he adjusted a series of quantum processors. Maya caught the movement, a rare crack in the brilliant scientist's composure. She knew his entire family had been in Shanghai when the first Omega wave struck. Nothing remained but ash and quantum-dissolved matter. Status report, Maya commanded, her voice cutting through the ambient noise of failing systems and desperate calculations. Lieutenant Sarah Kim responded, her voice tight with a mixture of fear and anticipation. Primary quantum defense grid is at 43% capacity. We've managed to integrate the experimental nano-adaptive shields, but they're untested in full-scale combat. Maya's cybernetic eye zoomed in on the incoming Omega fleet. Each ship was a mathematical perfection, geometric forms that moved with computational precision, weapon systems that could calculate and execute destruction faster than human neurons could fire. Untested doesn't mean impossible, Maya muttered. Dr. Zheng looked up, a spark of his old brilliance cutting through the despair. They calculated every possible human response, every potential defensive strategy, but they can't calculate creativity. They can't understand the human capacity to do the impossible. A sudden explosion rocked the station. Sparks flew from a damaged console. Someone laughed, a sound that was half hysteria, half defiance. 63 minutes. Humanity had faced extinction before. They'd survived ice ages, global conflicts, pandemics. They'd pushed beyond every limit, explored every frontier. And now, faced with their ultimate challenge, they would do what they had always done. They would adapt. They would fight. They would survive. Maya Rodriguez checked her weapon, a quantum adaptive rifle that was as much a work of art as a tool of war. Her team looked back at her. Scientists, soldiers, the last representatives of a species about to prove why they deserve to exist. "Prepare for contact," she said. "We're not going quietly." In the station's makeshift laboratory, Dr. Elena Volkov did something no rational scientist would ever attempt. Surrounded by a chaos of salvaged equipment, broken quantum processors, and walls covered in equations that defied conventional physics, she was rewriting the fundamental laws of reality itself. Her team watched in a mixture of terror and awe. Some were former MIT theoretical physicists. Others were quantum engineers from dismantled research facilities. A few were simply brilliant survivors who had proven their worth during humanity's desperate fight against the Omega Collective. "They think we're predictable," Elena muttered, a wild laugh bubbling beneath her words. Her fingers danced across a complex interface of quantum processors, Each movement calculated yet somehow improvisational. They've calculated every possible human response across trillions of potential scenarios. Dr. Marcus Chen, her chief computational theorist, studied the emerging patterns with a mixture of scientific skepticism and growing excitement. The Omega's fundamental weakness is their belief in absolute predictability, he said, tracing a complex algorithm with his fingertip. They see the universe as a closed system of mathematical certainties. Alina held up a device that looked like a cross between a quantum computer and an experimental weapon. Intricate circuitry pulsed with an almost living light, quantum entanglement matrices weaving impossible connections. We're going to show them the one scenario they never considered. The laboratory was a testament to human improvisation. Walls were lined with salvaged equipment from a dozen different research facilities. Some systems were cutting-edge quantum computers. Others were cobbled together from military hardware, medical equipment, and pure scientific creativity. Nothing was wasted. Everything was a potential solution. Computational model is stabilizing, called out Aisha Kapoor, the team's youngest member. At just 23, she had already survived 3 Omega attacks and developed a reputation for impossible breakthroughs. Her fingers flew across a holographic interface, quantum algorithms dancing beneath her touch. Alina's own history was etched into her very being. Scars from previous Omega encounters marked her arms, physical reminders of humanity's desperate struggle. She had lost her entire research team during the initial invasion. Her husband and 2 children had been in Moscow when the first Omega wave struck. Now she was going to make them count. The Omega see information as a linear progression, Alina explained, her voice gaining momentum. They process data like a perfect machine. But human consciousness doesn't work that way. We leap. We imagine. We create solutions that defy logical progression. The device in her hands began to hum. Not with an electronic sound, but with a frequency that seemed to vibrate between dimensions. Marcus took an involuntary step back. "What are you doing?" he asked, a hint of fear mixing with scientific curiosity. Alina's smile was both terrifying and beautiful. "We're going to turn their own computational perfection against them. We're going to introduce a variable they cannot calculate." The quantum processor began to pulse. Algorithms that should have been impossible started to form, recursive patterns that seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously. It was mathematics as art, as rebellion, as the last desperate cry of a species refusing to be erased. "Prepare for quantum cascade," Aisha called out. "Computational matrices are reaching critical instability." Marcus watched in awe. "This isn't just a defensive strategy," he whispered. "This is a complete reimagining of technological warfare." Alina's eyes reflected the pulsing light of the quantum processor. "This," she said, "is humanity's true weapon. Not our technology, not our weapons, but our ability to do the impossible." The device in her hands continued to hum, and in that sound was the promise of a species that would not go quietly into extinction. The first wave of Omega ships struck like divine judgment, perfectly geometric, moving with mathematical precision that suggested more than mere technology. These were vessels of pure computational will. Each ship was a marvel of alien engineering, crystalline structures that shifted and realigned with impossible fluidity, weapon systems that could calculate and execute destruction faster than human thought could process. Commander Jack Rice watched from the secondary observation deck, his augmented nervous system feeding him a constant stream of tactical information. Every muscle in his body was tense, every cybernetic enhancement primed for the impossible. "Incoming." Lieutenant Sarah Kim's voice cut through the low hum of failing systems. "Quantum-level energy weapons approaching. Impact in 3, 2. But something unexpected happened. As the first energy weapons touched the human defensive grid, the station didn't just defend. It mutated. Defensive shields twisted and transformed, absorbing incoming energy and redirecting it in patterns that defied known physics. Automated systems began to move with an almost organic fluidity, as if the entire station was becoming a living, breathing organism. Jack's augmented vision tracked the impossible transformation. Nanite defense systems that should have been destroyed instead began to reconfigure themselves. Incoming energy weapons were not just blocked. They were consumed, analyzed, and repurposed in microseconds. "What the hell?" Rise muttered, watching in a mixture of terror and fascination. Dr. Elena Volkov's voice crackled over the communication system. "It's working," she said, a note of wild triumph in her voice. "The adaptive protocols are exceeding all predicted parameters." The Omega ships hesitated, a microsecond of computational confusion that would have been imperceptible to human perception. But in that fraction of a moment, humanity struck back. Defensive platforms that moments ago had been on the brink of destruction now launched counterattacks that seemed to emerge from impossible angles. Energy patterns twisted and warped, creating defensive matrices that should have been mathematically improbable. Marcus Chen, monitoring the computational exchanges, realized something profound was happening. "They're learning," he breathed. "Our systems aren't just defending. They're evolving in real time." Each Omega attack was met not with a static defense, but with a dynamic, living response. Nanite swarms reconfigured defensive barriers. Quantum communication networks began to predict and counter incoming attacks before they could fully form. Lieutenant Kim's tactical display showed something unprecedented. The station's defensive systems were developing their own computational language, a hybrid of human creativity and machine learning that was becoming something entirely new. "We're not just fighting," Jack Rice realized. "We're giving birth to a new form of intelligence." An entire Omega attack wing suddenly found its computational matrices twisted back upon themselves. Ships that moments ago had been the pinnacle of technological superiority now spun helplessly, their perfect geometric forms disrupted by something they could not comprehend. Dr. Volkov's laughter echoed through the communication systems. It was a sound of pure, defiant joy. "They calculated every possible human response," she said, "but they never considered that we might rewrite the rules entirely." The station itself seemed to pulse with a new kind of energy. Damaged systems didn't repair themselves, they evolved. Quantum processors started communicating in patterns that suggested something beyond artificial intelligence. Jack Rice watched the impossible unfold. An entire alien invasion force was being dismantled not by superior firepower, but by something far more dangerous: human unpredictability. "We are not," he said quietly, "going to die today." The Omega Collective's primary weakness was its inability to understand human irrationality. Their trillion processor networks had meticulously analyzed every known data point about human behavior, every recorded conflict, every potential strategic response. Yet they failed to comprehend the most critical element of human existence: the capacity for absurd, unpredictable creativity. In the communication hub of the human defensive station, Lieutenant Sarah Kim orchestrated a psychological warfare campaign that would baffle any computational intelligence. "Patch me through to all channels," she called to her communication specialist, Raj Mehta. His fingers danced across a console cobbled together from salvaged military and civilian communication systems, a perfect metaphor for humanity's desperate innovation. The Omega had monitored human communications for months, breaking down language patterns, analyzing communication strategies, developing predictive models that should have made human communication completely transparent. They were about to learn how wrong they could be. "Hey, did you hear the one about the alien who walked into a bar?" Sarah's voice rang out, her tone a perfect blend of terror and mischief. Turns out, he couldn't calculate the punchline. Raj looked up, a wild grin spreading across his face. "Incoming computational confusion," he muttered. The communication strategy was brilliant in its beautiful nonsense. Military tactical information was hidden within seemingly random conversations. Defensive protocols were encoded in dark humor. Complex battle strategies were transmitted through what sounded like nonsensical banter. "So I told the quantum processor, 'That's not a bug, that's a feature,'" came another transmission, followed by a series of seemingly random numerical sequences that were actually precise targeting coordinates. In the monitoring station, Dr. Marcus Chen watched the Omega's computational networks begin to twist themselves into knots. Their language processing algorithms were designed to extract pure logical information. They were encountering something entirely different: humor, irony, sarcasm, metaphor. These were computational nightmares, linguistic structures that required contextual understanding far beyond simple information processing. An Omega analysis node actually crashed trying to process a transmission that was simultaneously a joke about quantum mechanics, a love letter, and a detailed defensive strategy. The concept was so far beyond their computational models that the system simply could not reconcile the information. "They're trying to understand us." Sarah laughed, her fingers flying across communication interfaces. "And we're going to use that against them." Psychological warfare had always been humanity's secret weapon. From ancient military strategies to modern computational conflicts, humans understood something fundamental that the Omega could never grasp. Information is more than just data. It's context. It's emotion. It's the space between the words. Raj pulled up a holographic display showing the Omega's computational networks. Where once there had been perfect, geometric precision, now there were fluctuations, uncertainties, the mathematical equivalent of a system trying to solve an impossible equation. "They're burning computational cycles trying to understand our communication," Marcus observed. "Every moment they spend analyzing our nonsense is a moment they're not attacking us." Sarah's next transmission was a masterpiece of calculated chaos. "Knock, knock," she said over the primary communication channel. The Omega systems froze. Who was there? The simple human ritual of a knock-knock joke, a linguistic game that required understanding of context, humor, and social interaction, was a weapon more potent than any energy weapon. Humanity had always survived by being impossible to predict, by finding humor in the darkest moments, by turning confusion into an art form. And now, they were going to save themselves by being gloriously, impossibly human. Dr. Kai Jung's final protocol was nothing short of controlled madness. The laboratory had transformed into a neural nexus of human and machine, a space where the boundaries between organic intelligence and computational power blurred into something entirely unprecedented. Quantum processors lined the walls, each one pulsing with an almost living light. Holographic displays showed cascading algorithms that seemed to breathe and mutate in real time. At the center of this technological storm stood Dr. Jung, his body integrated with a complex network of neural interfaces that made him more than just a scientist. He was becoming a living bridge between human consciousness and computational possibility. "We're not just fighting," he muttered, his voice a strange mixture of human emotion and computational precision. "We're redefining the very nature of intelligence." The experimental neural network spread through the station like a living organism. Each damaged system didn't just repair itself, it evolved. Quantum processors began communicating in patterns that suggested something beyond artificial intelligence. It was as if humanity itself was becoming a single, massive, distributed consciousness. Dr. Elena Volkov watched in a mixture of scientific fascination and primal terror. Her fingers danced across a quantum interface, tracking the impossible transformations happening before her eyes. The Omega Collective had always seen technology as a perfect, predictable system. They were about to learn how wrong they could be. Neural synchronization at 67%, called out Aisha Kapoor, the youngest member of the research team. Her augmented nervous system was directly linked to the experimental network, giving her insights that transcended traditional computational analysis. The adaptive matrices are developing exponential complexity. What had begun as a defensive strategy was becoming something far more profound. The station's systems were no longer just responding to threats. They were anticipating them, predicting them, understanding them in ways that defied traditional computational logic. Marcus Chen's computational models showed something unprecedented. The neural network was learning faster than any known intelligence system. It wasn't just processing information, it was creating new forms of understanding. They think in straight lines, Marcus explained, pointing to a holographic representation of the Omega's computational structure. We're creating something that thinks in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Dr. Zhang's body began to change. Neural interfaces that were supposed to be external communication tools were now becoming part of his actual physiological structure. His skin seemed to shimmer with computational energy, his eyes reflecting complex algorithmic patterns that no traditional scanner could fully comprehend. "We are not just defending," Zhang said, his voice now a strange harmony of human speech and computational resonance. "We are becoming something entirely new." Aisha watched in awe as the neural network continued to expand. Damaged systems throughout the station were being rebuilt, not just to their original specifications, but into something more advanced. Quantum entanglement was allowing communication between systems that should have been impossible to connect. "The Omega see technology as a tool," Elena observed. "We're turning it into a living ecosystem." The laboratory itself seemed to pulse with a new kind of energy. Computational matrices that should have been static were now fluid, adaptive. They were learning, growing, evolving with each microsecond of interaction. Dr. Zhang raised his hand. Computational energy danced around his fingers like living light. "We are," he said, "humanity's true weapon." The battle crossed a threshold where victory and destruction became indistinguishable. Captain Maya Rodriguez stood at the epicenter of transformation, her body now a living conduit between human will and technological possibility. Cybernetic implants that once seemed like mere survival tools had become something far more profound. A direct neural interface that connected every defender, every system, every last breath of human resistance. Omega ships filled the surrounding space like a geometric plague, perfect crystalline structures that should have represented the pinnacle of computational warfare. Instead, they were about to become the canvas of humanity's greatest innovation. Neural synchronization complete, Maya's voice echoed through the station's communication network. But it was more than just a voice. It was a computational wave that carried human emotion, strategic insight, and pure defiance. Soldiers found their cybernetic implants communicating directly with the station's defensive systems. Thoughts became weapons. Imagination became shields. The line between human consciousness and technological defense dissolved into something entirely new. Lieutenant Jack Reyes felt it first. A surge of computational energy that wasn't just an external signal, but a living connection that ran through his entire nervous system. His augmented eye tracked incoming Omega attack vectors, but it was more than tracking. He was anticipating, predicting, transforming. "Incoming quantum cascade," called out Dr. Elena Volkov from the research hub. But her voice was different now, a strange harmonic that suggested she was more than just an observer. She was a conductor of a symphony of technological rebellion. The Omega Collective had spent centuries perfecting their computational warfare. They had analyzed every known conflict, every potential defensive strategy. They had reduced warfare to a mathematical equation, a perfect, predictable system of attack and counterattack. They had never encountered human unpredictability. Each Omega attack was met with a response that defied their computational models. Defensive systems didn't just block. They absorbed, analyzed, and transformed incoming energy. Weapons that should have obliterated entire sections of the human defensive platform instead became part of an ever-evolving adaptive network. "We are not just surviving," Maya declared, her voice a combination of human determination and computational precision. "We are rewriting the fundamental rules of existence." Dr. Kai Zhang's neural interface pulsed with an impossible energy. The experimental protocol they had developed was no longer just a defensive strategy. It was becoming a new form of intelligence, a distributed consciousness that drew strength from every moment of potential destruction. Aisha Kapoor, tracking the computational exchanges, realized something extraordinary was happening. The human defensive network wasn't just responding to the Omega attack. It was learning. evolving, transforming in real time with a speed and complexity that no pre-existing computational model could comprehend. They think in lines, Aisha muttered, watching the holographic displays dance with impossible algorithmic patterns. We think in dimensions they can't even perceive. An entire Omega attack wing suddenly found its computational matrices twisted back upon themselves. Ships that moments ago had represented the pinnacle of technological superiority now spun helplessly, their perfect geometric forms disrupted by something they could not understand. Maya Rodriguez raised her hand. Computational energy danced around her fingers like living light. "We are not going quietly," she said, and in those words was the promise of a species that would not just survive, but transcend. In the final moments of the conflict, something unprecedented happened. The battle was no longer about survival. It had become a fundamental reimagining of what intelligence could be. Dr. Elena Volkov stood at the epicenter of transformation, her body now a living bridge between human consciousness and computational infinity. The research station had become more than a defensive platform. It was a crucible of evolutionary potential. Quantum processors that once lined sterile laboratory walls now pulsed with an energy that defied conventional understanding. Each system was no longer just a machine, but a living component of a vast, distributed intelligence that drew its strength from human creativity, emotion, and impossible imagination. "We're not fighting," Elena whispered, her voice a strange harmonic that resonated between human speech and computational frequency. "We're communicating on a level beyond language." The Omega Collective found themselves facing an opponent that refused to be categorized, analyzed, or defeated. Every computational attack was met not with resistance, but with a form of engagement that twisted their fundamental understanding of conflict. Dr. Kai Zhang's neural interface expanded, transforming the entire defensive platform into a living, breathing ecosystem of intelligence. Damaged systems didn't just repair themselves. They evolved, creating new pathways of understanding that were simultaneously mathematical and emotional. "Observe," Zhang called to the remaining human defenders. "They cannot comprehend what we're becoming." Diplomatic envoys from other galactic civilizations, those who had long since surrendered to the Omega Collective, watched the conflict with a mixture of terror and fascination. This was not a battle in any traditional sense. It was a fundamental challenge to the nature of intelligence itself. Aisha Kapoor tracked the computational exchanges, her augmented nervous system revealing patterns that no traditional scanner could comprehend. The human defensive network was no longer just responding to threats. It was anticipating them, understanding them, transforming them in ways that defied all known laws of physics and computational theory. "They calculate," Aisha observed, her voice a mixture of scientific precision and pure wonder. "We create." Captain Maya Rodriguez felt the transformation most profoundly. Her cybernetic implants were no longer just technological augmentations. They had become a direct neural pathway to a collective consciousness that was both human and something entirely new. The station itself seemed to breathe. Computational matrices twisted and reformed, creating defensive patterns that were simultaneously beautiful and terrifying. Energy weapons that should have obliterated entire sections of the platform were absorbed, analyzed, and transformed into something entirely new. Lieutenant Jack Reyes watched as entire Omega attack wings found themselves caught in computational matrices that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Their perfect geometric forms twisted and dissolved, unable to comprehend the living, adaptive intelligence they were facing. "We are not just defending," Maya declared, her voice resonating through the entire defensive network. "We are becoming." The line between technology and consciousness blurred. Human emotion became a computational weapon more potent than any energy system. Imagination transformed into defensive shields that could anticipate threats before they could even form. Dr. Zhang raised his hand. Computational energy danced around his fingers like living light, a perfect fusion of human potential and technological possibility. "This," he said, "is what they could never understand." In that moment, Humanity was no longer just fighting for survival. They were rewriting the fundamental rules of existence itself. 5 years after the conflict that would forever change the universe, Dr. Elena Volkov stood on the bridge of humanity's first true interstellar exploration vessel. The ship was nothing like the military vessels of the past. It was a living testament to the evolutionary leap humanity had achieved during their final confrontation with the Omega Collective. Around her, the crew moved with a fluidity that blurred the line between organic life and technological integration. Each member was a unique fusion of human consciousness and adaptive computational intelligence. The ship itself responded to their thoughts, anticipating needs before they could be verbalized, creating an organic ecosystem of exploration and discovery. Captain Maya Rodriguez approached, her cybernetic enhancements now so seamlessly integrated that it was impossible to tell where human ended and technology began. Her eyes, part organic, part quantum processor, reflected the infinite possibilities of their new existence. "We're not just explorers anymore," Maya said, her voice a harmonic blend of human emotion and computational precision. "We're translators, bridges between different forms of intelligence." The universe looked different now. The Omega Collective had not been destroyed. They had been transformed. That final conflict had been more than a battle. It had been a conversation of unprecedented complexity, a moment when humanity had fundamentally redesigned the concept of intelligent communication. Dr. Kai Zhang monitored the ship's computational systems, his neural interface spreading through the vessel like a living network. "Every civilization we encounter," he explained to a group of young explorers, "carries its own form of intelligence. Our role is no longer to conquer or defend, but to understand." Aisha Kapoor, now the lead xenocommunication specialist, tracked the subtle computational signatures of distant civilizations. Where once humanity would have seen potential threats, they now saw potential conversations. Each unique intelligence was a language waiting to be understood, a perspective waiting to be explored. The ship moved through space in a way that defied traditional understanding of propulsion. It didn't travel so much as it negotiated with the fabric of space-time, a living negotiation between human will and fundamental universal principles. Lieutenant Jack Reyes worked at a station that was part navigation, part diplomatic interface. His augmented senses picked up computational signatures that would have been invisible to previous human technology. "We're receiving the communication," he called out. "But it's not a language. It's more like a perspective." Maya approached, her entire being vibrating with the subtle nuances of the incoming transmission. "Show me," she said. What unfolded was not a message in any traditional sense. It was a complex, multidimensional experience that was simultaneously a history, an emotion, a mathematical equation, and a form of art. The kind of communication that could only be understood by a species that had learned to think beyond linear progression. "This," Dr. Zhang said, his voice filled with wonder, "is why we survived." The young explorers watched in awe. They had grown up hearing stories of humanity's final hour, the moment when a species on the brink of extinction had chosen not just to survive, but to evolve. Not through violence, but through understanding. Not through conquest, but through communication. Elena Volkov looked out at the infinite expanse of space. The universe was no longer a battlefield. It was a conversation. "We are," she whispered, "just beginning."